What I wanted to just start with was I saw something that you wrote on LinkedIn recently, which was let me just make sure I say exactly how you wrote it. But you said every marketing investment should answer one question: does this make us as a brand easier to choose?
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, could you tell people a bit more about what you meant by that?
So we live in a society, both real and virtual, where there are more options than we can mentally process. There, I don't think, is a product that exists in market where there isn't an alternative in waiting or an alternative that is coming. And so as we think about the purpose of marketing, it is really to motivate the consumer to do what we want them to do when we want them to do it. Said simply, marketing's goal is to motivate action. What we invest in should give the consumer a reason to believe that it is time to take the action that we want them to take. Or else you have to ask yourself, why are you doing it? And that doesn't mean you don't do it. It just means that you shouldn't confuse something that is a must or a need with something that is a could, should, or a want.
And could you help give us an example for people who are kind of going, yes, I get it conceptually, but maybe something that you were discussing in your last marketing meeting where someone said, this is an idea, and you then had to use that framework?
Yeah. You get approached by sports teams every day to sponsor, to put your logo on the uniform as an example, or to be an in-arena sponsor. And beyond doing sort of a break-even analysis as to, okay, if you're going to spend $100,000, how much does it cost us typically to get a customer? Divide that into the 100,000. This is how many customers we need to break even. Are we doing it to break even, or are we doing it to make money? Is how does it foster your brand to be thought of in a more relatable way to the customer that you are looking to motivate to take action? Simply showing up isn't good enough anymore. If you walk into any stadium on my side of the pond or yours, there is enough messaging in the stadium to feel like you're standing in Times Square. And if you've stood in Times Square, the reference is it's stimulation overload. And so with everybody screaming at you about something that is so important to them, it makes it really hard for you to realize what's important to you. So finding those places where you have less clutter and can tell more meaningful stories is, I think, a fundamental part of building an effective marketing stack.
And before we kind of get on to your career in different places you've worked at, the point around Times Square, I love, and around simulation, and actually, you just look at the World Cup, you go in there, and there's even watching the post-match interviews, there's 50,000 brands all trying to get our attention. What would your advice be for a CMO who has maybe been a VP of marketing, they're now a CMO, and they're maybe feeling a bit like, oh my God, where do I even start? I feel like as a CMO, I'm the one in Times Square, because it's incredibly difficult to market.
So to say it cleverly, FOMO is not a marketing strategy. And it is very easy when you take seat to be worried on all the things that you're missing out. That's why I think it's important for any individual starting a role, whether they have done a similar job or not, come in with a notebook, not a playbook. You've got to step backwards to understand how the business got to where it is before you can possibly chart the course forward. Unfortunately, many roles don't give you that 90, 120 days to learn. They're expecting you to build the plane, fly the plane, and optimize the flight along the way, which isn't necessarily an easy or a smart thing to do. But if you go in with the curiosity mindset to first test out, do we understand how we're getting the results that we are, for better or worse? That at least grounds you in potentially figuring out the 1, 2, or 3 unlocks that can help you stabilize a business, grow a business, or resuscitate a business.
And the part that you said about bring a notebook, not a playbook, I think is maybe more pertinent now than ever, because I think maybe in the past, maybe this is a bit harsh, but I think maybe CMOs had a certain playbook they'd take to an industry and just carry that out. But I think now with AI, the playbook is almost deteriorating or getting moldy as soon as you start to kind of use it in certain categories or sectors. What are your thoughts for those CMOs who feel, oh shit, the playbook that I have is now a bit moldy or stale because of AI? Like, what should those types of CMOs be doing?
Well, just to level set. You absolutely, as a seasoned marketing executive or brand leader, have a playbook that you've run that has allowed you to generate whatever success that you have. And by all means, bring that playbook with you, but you don't start out with it. You got to assess the talent on your team. There are certain go-to plays that you're going to run, to stay on the sports metaphor, but you begin with your talent assessment. Profitability is the goal, but it starts with the people that can help you build the processes to measure and generate the progress to drive the profit. Only once you have an assessment of the people could you begin to understand the process and then the playbook that goes with it. AI doesn't kill a playbook at all. I actually think what it does, it allows you to try those plays out quickly in a virtual way and perhaps iterations. And I'm going to use, American football as an example. If the play calls for the wide receiver to run a fly route, which is to just run as fast as they can, as furthest downfield, to see what it does to the rest of the field so that you can throw under. AI allows you to run that simulation a couple different ways. Maybe they run 30 yards downfield. Maybe they run 50 yards downfield. Maybe they don't run at all, and see what the impact is on the rest of the field. AI allows you to do that. It allows you to have a more robust test and learn agenda quickly without leveraging too much of your financial resources, so that your wins can come faster and your losses can come with smaller loss.
Yeah, I think it's a good point actually about the reframing. Yes, the playbook works, but actually maybe the point is you can try and iterate faster on that using AI. Yeah, I think that's nice. And keeping with the sports metaphors, clearly you're a massive American football fan. What I'd love is for you to, just for people who don't know, you give us a rough rundown of different places you've worked at and a summary of your career, but then maybe give a kind of analogy of what that is in sporting terms, kind of comparatively.
Sure. So, my career has been a journey to understand how to build businesses really through solving what I think are the three most foundational questions that any leader in business has to be able to answer. Who are we as a brand? Who are we built for as a brand? And then how do we get chosen as a brand? And my first career was at the agency side. Started out in media and then spent the bulk of my career at the largest private agency network in the world, which was Gray Advertising, where I led the formation of their youth entertainment and lifestyle division and had some incredible opportunities to work on things like Warner Brothers theatrical marketing, Reebok, wrote the brand architecture for the Harry Potter franchise for Warner Brothers Consumer Products, was involved with Starwood on the launch of their W Hotel brand and several other projects, but eventually wanted to continue my progress towards the front of the train. And so went to the in-house client side. You're talking to one of the few guys that can proudly say that he was an Avon lady and knows how to sell a lip gloss and still does.
Nice.
Because that's the way I learned that business. And
love that.
From there, after scaling their young women's business, went over to a small company called Victoria's Secret to do it for a brand.
Not small anymore, are they?
No, called Victoria's Secret Pink. Scaled that business, spent a few more years in the wholesale fashion world. And then the bulk of my client side career was really 11 years at EssilorLuxottica as the chief marketing officer for their multi-unit business Pearle Vision, where I had the privilege of developing not just one 5-year plan, but two, and seeing them through and really elevating that business into an eye care first brand that brought them into the top 30 of all franchise brands around the world. After an 11-year career at EssilorLuxottica, I stepped away to write my book, Moving Your Brand Out of the Friend Zone, which is really...
No one wants to be in the friend zone, do it?
Nobody wants to be in the friend zone. It's the same thing in business. In today's landscape, you've got to have a passionate relationship with your consumer. You've got to create brand love. And so for me, the book was really an ability to kind of take years of thoughts and constructs and put them down on paper to do something that I love to do, which is to mentor, to teach, to train, to help people avoid the mistakes that I've made, but maybe unlock their own potential. The book came out and was approached by a health and wellness roll-up to help them prepare for a sale. Spent about 2 years there, and then most recently finished up as the chief marketing officer for Take 5 Oil Change, which is now $1 billion for quick lube oil change business in North America, 1,400 locations, really in a category that is quite commoditized. I was brought in as their first ever CMO to modernize their marketing infrastructure, to build the rigor and discipline using data to help really drive the outcomes that are needed to sustain the growth of that brand.
Amazing. And just because I think the sports analogies will be fascinating, are there any types of, how do you compare those types of companies to maybe some different teams or players or anything that comes to mind?
You start out when you're in the agency world, you can be working on major league businesses, but you're the guy who's never going to get in to play the game. As I look at my career, I progressed through the minor leagues into a starting position in the major leagues, and the businesses that I've worked on, whether it was Pearle Vision at about $1 billion or Take 5 at $1.4 billion, those are major league businesses that allow you to play the game for real. To apply that art and science discipline that is marketing in a way that really impacts the lives of thousands of people. The pressure that comes with leading marketing is a privilege, because if you do it well, you can really help a lot of people unlock their dreams, their potentials. Every franchise location at Pearle Vision had an owner operator whose family was dependent on the success of that location. And I take that seriously. It's the same thing at Take 5, where, 50% of our locations or a little bit more were owned by franchisees. These are people whose families are dependent on your ability to impact their business. So it's quite humbling to be in a position to impact so many people and do great work while doing great things for people.
Mm. And so you said you did 11 years at Luxottica as Esilor Luxottica, 2 5-year plans. And then in what kind of 2025, then you joined Driven Brands.
Joined Driven Brands in 2025 and just finished up about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. ChatGPT launched November 2022. What I find interesting is the comparison of you were 11 years in the CMO of Pearle Vision, and then with kind of a pre-AI, let's call it marketing world. And then we've got post-ChatGPT launch at Driven Brands, where suddenly AI is a thing and you're the first CMO. Could you compare those two different roles and tell us a bit more about how similar and also different those experiences were?
So if you think back to when internet advertising became a thing, everybody rushed to do internet advertising, and it was like the wild, wild west. And I don't think anybody really understood how to do it. The measurements were incredibly wonky. But if you weren't there, you had FOMO. You felt like you were missing out. I think AI has enabled marketers to be better and worse at their craft if they're seasoned, but I think has played a really detrimental role in bringing up the next generation of brand marketers and business leaders. Because the most important thing that you find when you're building a high performing team is your entry level and junior people. If they don't have curiosity, you're never going to have a strong bench. And AI for a lot of people has taken out the joy and the hardship of that curiosity journey. I mean, look, I learned how to sell a lip gloss by traveling door to door with Avon representatives. I learned how to fit a bra by working in a Victoria's Secret. I learned how to become an optician by working in a Pearle Vision. I learned how to change oil by working in a quick lube garage. That curiosity is so incredibly important. And while AI allows you to have a lot more information in your fingertips, it should only motivate you to be more curious and maybe free up more time for you to get away from it and experience your brand in 3 and 4 dimensions versus being the excuse to say, well, I understand it because it spit out the answers.
No, that's a good point, actually. But I also wonder as well if the people who are kind of already innately curious pre-AI would they retain their curiosity, and would AI really change that?
Yeah.
So I wonder if
it's a great point. It really depends on how you're wired as a human being. Are you a first generation adapter? Are you the first guy or gal who's going to run out and get the new gadget? Or do you wait until the second generation comes out because the first generation has bugs?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I believe AI, like any data sourced tool, is only as good as the questions that you ask. To understand what questions you ask AI is much like the questions that you ask in any business. in looking at any data, because those questions will allow you to understand the measurements that come from it and if they are meaningful. You can ask a lot of questions and get a lot of data on almost any topic, but just because you can measure it doesn't necessarily mean that it is meaningful. And so AI runs the risk for today's marketer of providing them information that isn't necessarily meaningful to help them do what they need to do when they need to do it.
Yeah. And I think the kind of, from what it sounds like, it's if there will be almost this barbell of the extremes of, on one side, you'll have the people who are, let's say, are innately curious and maybe have a decent marketing foundation, who with AI get, 10x, 100x, but then maybe the people who aren't as curious, or when they don't want to go to work at an optician's, or they don't want to understand the details of like how an auto services company actually works. And if those start to default to a chatbot for those types of things, maybe those lose out. So I think maybe you have an extremes of, you have some marketers who really thrive, and then others who, as you mentioned, will kind of fall off.
Much like in politics, the answer lies in the middle.
Yeah.
We unfortunately live in a very polarized world right now. And I think your articulation is spot on. It's been positioned as an either or, and it should be an and. Anybody who's not playing with AI is making a huge mistake. But the bigger mistake is letting AI, not necessarily let AI co-pilot or be sitting in the backseat of the car. I look at AI as probably like the best, most educated intern that I could ever hire. Okay. They're not going to solve the problem for me, but they could give me some information to help me problem solve.
I love that. Let's clip that. That's perfect. So super interesting in terms of, great, let's call it the AI modern marketer, for the auto services. Now, take me back a bit to 11 years, 2 5-year plans.
Yeah. No AI.
No AI.
No AI.
What is that? Because I also think some of the marketers who are using AI will find it interesting because they can take some of those foundational things that you did across those 2 5-year plans and take that to use in the AI stuff.
So in a world before AI, you had to do the research yourself. You had to get into the data. You had to recognize what data was going to tell you and what it wasn't. Data doesn't make decisions. We make decisions using data. For me, a big part of whatever degree of success you want to qualify those 5-year plans started out with actually engaging with real people. If you want to understand who you are on your best day and you want to understand who you are on your worst day, talk to somebody that broke up with you. It's like in a relationship. Your exes are going to give you a lot more insight into what they liked about you and where you fell short. And so a big part of those 5-year plans was spent listening to franchisees that had been with us for a long time, franchisees that had just joined, franchisees that had fired us, patients and customers that had been with us for a long time, patients and customers that had just joined, and then patients and customers that had fired us. The detractors are an incredible, valuable source of information, provided that you take it in the context of inevitably you let them down. So they're going to give you a true, honest, but slightly more emotionally charged reason to think that your business is broken than somebody who is an advocate who's going to give you a slightly more emotionally charged reason to believe you're really good at what you do. You can only understand the 2 concentric circles and then the diagram that comes from it by talking to them, and that establishes the truths of your brand and the human truths, which then allow you to figure out the intersection of that Venn diagram, which is where your brand positioning falls and where your story inevitably gets told.
You were there 11 years, which is a long time. It's much longer than I've been at Passion Fruit. You've probably done a lot of things which, as you mentioned at the start, some things you're like, did I do this? Mistakes. Could you help give us an understanding of what are the mistakes you made as a CMO that you wish you could go back?
We don't have 2 hours, but I'll give you a really easy one that I'm proud of because I didn't replicate it. When I joined Pearle Vision, roughly 1 out of 2 transactions was being driven by a buy one, get one free offer. And to drive profitability, the easiest way to drive profitability was to eliminate buy one, get one. And so a very logical decision, eliminate buy one, get one. The mistake that I made was that I didn't have enough of a sense of the numerator in the brand value equation. So in my book, Moving Your Brand Out of the Friend Zone, I talk about brand value. Whether you make $50, $500, or $5 million a year, everybody wants brand value from the products, services, and services that they experience. Brand value equals the experience as your numerator divided by the price as your denominator. If you deliver an amazing experience, you frankly can charge whatever the heck you want. And as long as that relationship, that ratio is 3-to-1, 4-to-1, nobody is going to balk at paying for something that's a little bit more costly if they walked away feeling like it was an amazing experience. Think about hotels that you've stayed out at or meals that you've had. We can feel great about spending, $150 on a great meal if the wait staff was awesome and the restaurant was nice and the table was comfortable and the linens were clean. But we could also feel terrible about spending $15 on a meal if it was bad service and it was dirty and the food didn't taste good. The idea of experiential marketing in your marketing mix, I didn't fully process where our experience stood relative to the fact that we were giving somebody a pair of glasses for free for every pair that we were selling. And as a result of pulling buy one, get one out of the mix without taking enough time to fully understand the experience aspect of our value equation, our business fell. And we had to put it back in until we could improve, enhance, refine, whatever word you want to call it, the experience aspect of our brand so that when we eventually removed it, we had enough experience in our numerator to justify the higher price point that we were charging in our denominator.
So just to make sure I understood correctly, effectively what you're saying is the experience when you were running the buy one, get one free wasn't to a high enough standard. And then when you pulled it, people didn't see the value and then
Correct.
Business fell. That makes sense.
Traffic fell, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, super clear. So that's in terms of, we've got one thing which you kind of regret or you've learned from. And what's the single most successful thing you did as a CMO during your 11 years there?
It has to be the team that I built. I mean, I surrounded myself with complementary skill sets with one common thread, which is every single person on the team had to have the gravitas to be able to say to me, you're wrong, and here's why. I am somebody who needs you to have a point of view, or I'll give you one. And I surround myself with people that have strong points of view, because oftentimes hearing an alternative point of view may not change your mind completely, but will shape your thinking. And I was truly blessed with the team that I built there of thought leaders who would want to engage in that debate, but also understood that once we took a decision, it was a commitment to execute it and did it as flawlessly as could possibly be done.
Well, that's super clear. So you got one regret and one big win. Love it. And what I was thinking about earlier was so you started at Take 5 Touring Brands, and what I was trying to think about is what does that even look like when someone says, great, we haven't really had a CMO before. They hadn't had a CMO before you, had they?
No.
They haven't had a CMO before. We want to bring in a CMO. We want someone to effectively build out marketing. It's your first day. What does that even look like? Help us understand.
It's a lot of energy coming at you that you're trying to organize and process. Because there was a team there, but they hadn't had a CMO in seat. So again, if at the end of the day, it's about profitability, the beginning of that journey to drive it starts with people. And so you're spending a disproportionate amount of time early on really understanding the people aspect, both intellectually and emotionally and culturally, to figure out if you have the right group in the right seats, all on the right bus going in the same direction, while being expected to fly the plane and optimize the flight at the same time. So build it, fly it, optimize all at the same time. It's a lot. And it's exciting. It's also riddled with, there's going to be tension points. Developing a new, responsibility, accountability chart. It is riddled with insecurities, both for you as a leader, because you're trying to earn the trust of these folks, as well as with the team who's trying to figure out like, hey, am I going to have a job tomorrow? You're also trying to learn the vernacular of the business that you've walked into. So it's a lot that comes at you. Inevitably, you're going to stub your toe on one or more things. And, you just can't really be afraid to do it. You just got to hope that you have the support around you to allow you to do it, to eventually get the team all on one page, all focused on the same set of things. And then it's really ensuring that they have the passion to go out and win.
And I've been doing kind of sales basically for the last 2 years. And the biggest thing for me is making sure that I'm as close to customers and prospects, whether that's cold calling, in-persons, all that kind of stuff. And as soon as you feel like you're removed from that process, I feel like I'm not learning or I'm missing out on things. And it's those small things from conversations which make the discussions and the selling process way better. And at the start, you mentioned the fact that you've clearly worked at all the different, we've done a part of the job at all the different companies you're a marketer at. And I think that's such an underrated thing and incredibly important now, where it feels like sometimes there are marketers going into positions who actually don't even know that much about the product, or they haven't done the job, or they haven't tried it, or they haven't even gone to the checkout to buy the product. Talk me through what your approach was to that. Did you decide, you know what, I'm new to auto services, I'm going to get a job there? Like, how did that work?
My career has been a journey from the back of the train to the front. I started out in media, account management, then ran an agency, then went client side, and then moved up in the client world. Because in order to motivate the people in the roles and functions, you have to speak the language and understand what happens in each role and function. For me, going into the field is a way that I learn. I have to earn the trust of my operational partners almost more than anybody else, because marketing without operations is just stuff. Ideas that can't be brought to life in the four walls of your business, virtually or otherwise, may be great ideas, but they're just words on paper. And so the way that I can show deference and humility to the organization and the brand that I've been charged with leading is to get out and experience the brand in its 4 dimensions. And, the 4th dimension being the reaction from our customers. If you're working in an e-com business, you should man the customer service lines for a couple of days. If you have a brick and mortar business, work there. You see things that you're never going to pick up on a spreadsheet. And I find that to be an invaluable source of truth. It's not the only source of truth, but it's an invaluable source of truth. It helps shape your perspective as a leader. It also really helps you to personalize, which I think is so important, why you're doing what you're doing. When you have a budget of scale, it's easy to think about it's $30 million or $40 million. It's $100,000, but it's not your money. When you go work in one of your locations and you look at everybody that's depending on you to put people inside their shops, it very quickly becomes your money, and you start to really think a little bit differently about how you want to spend it.
And the source of truth thing, I think, is the most important. And it reminds me of a story, and I don't know how factually correct, this could be 70% factually correct, but it reminds me of something I read about Jeff Bezos, where they're in a board meeting and they were chatting about the customer service response times. And they were saying, the data says this, it takes 2 minutes or 1 minute 30 for a customer service rep to answer the phone when we call them. And they're kind of arguing about it. This data says this, says it. So Jeff just goes, you know what, why don't we just call customer service?
That's a true story.
They call customer service and they're waiting for 7 or 8 minutes or something like that. But I think it relates massively to what you're saying, which is unless you're out in the field or doing the thing or in the arena, it's very hard to comment or market.
Well, it's also hard, there's this concept of intellectual honesty. Marketing can't be expected to fix problems that are operational if they exist, should they exist. And I find that too often not being honest with yourself about what is happening in the 4 walls shifts your focus away from what aren't we doing well to what is he or she not doing well. And that's not necessarily marketing. It could be, what is CRM not doing well? What is fleet not doing well? When in reality, do you have an ops problem? And it's okay if you do. Doesn't mean that marketing or any other function shouldn't be there to help and support. But you can drink too much of your own Kool-Aid and think you're better at something than you are. If you just would be more open and curious, you can realize that sometimes the greatest opportunity doesn't require a nickel of marketing. It requires maybe an investment in training. It requires sometimes not doing certain things. Because again, marketing is not a panacea for a broken business. It just isn't.
And the no blame culture is so true. It's both what, I don't know if you're a big F1 fan, but Zach Brown, the kind of CEO at McLaren, that's massive. And it's completely changed with, them winning the World Championship and Toto Wolff at Mercedes. That's both one of their core mantras of when there's an issue with the pit stop or the engine or whatever, we don't blame individuals. We kind of accept it as a company and say, okay, how can we improve the process so this individual doesn't make the mistake?
Yeah, I ascribe to that. I believe in it, but it's also intellectual honesty. You cannot have a rational conversation with an emotional person. And the best thing you can have on your team are people that are invested emotionally. But it's not like you as an individual failed. It's something in our processes has failed. It's we're not doing something right. And I think too often, especially in today's landscape, there's always the notion of who is going to be held responsible. You can have who's going to be held accountable to fix it, but that doesn't mean responsible for the error. Different thing.
And now to kind of switch to the consumer and the D2C brands that you were kind of working with as Chief Brand Officer at Modern Performance. There's clearly in my head, I've never been a CMO, but if I'm just the CMO at Levi's, I feel like, okay, I get to know Levi's, great. I have quite a good idea about brand identity, all that kind of stuff, who I'm marketing to. But when you're kind of working as the CMO as a parent company, or maybe have lots of different sub-brands, I think that's much harder to do. And it's also much harder to be in the field and in the weeds. How did you approach being the Chief Brand Officer at that kind of company where you couldn't just have one company?
Again, it was the first ever in seat. And so to me, it is going back to the three fundamental questions and being really sure you understand the answers for each business in your portfolio, which is who are we built for, and how do we get chosen? You've got to be able to put yourself into the lens of that different brand or customer when solving that different brand or customer's problem, if it's marketing. You cannot do that if there is a real disconnection between the team and understanding who we are and who are we built for. And unfortunately, I've experienced that at portfolio companies that I've worked where there is a real challenge with shared understanding of those questions. And so it then spirals you into a lot of chaos, a lot of feelings, not facts, and it makes it unproductive.
And the other thing I saw on your LinkedIn, which was interesting, was the Kelly Clarkson, for people, I'm sure you can fill people in, but Kelly Clarkson, the Today Show, and then also, what even is a consumer brand platform?
So a consumer brand platform is a more eloquent way of saying we have a story to tell and we're going to present it to you as a consumer across various formats, channels, and outlets. But it's a shared story. It's a shared story format. What is the reason to believe? What is the reason that we should be chosen? And, I had the opportunity at Take 5 to do that for the first time in the brand's history, to put out a consistent yet comprehensive consumer brand platform focused on the problem that we were solving.
And could you tell us a bit more about the Kelly Clarkson bits and the Today Show?
Sure. So, working with NBC, integrations are a great way to storytell. It's a great way to deliver content, which is the output of strategy, which is the output of what story do you want to tell. So in the case of the Today Show, we were able to work into their winter preparation tips segment, the importance of car care, and within that, the importance of an oil change. And we were able to do that through a celebrity personality who was engaging with the Today Show staff on air, talking about the importance of getting their oil changed in the winter. We then extended our partnership with NBC by going to the Kelly Clarkson Show, which is in its final season. And so viewership is through the roof. Kelly is a great connecting point for the brand, for the audience that we were going after. And there we partnered with her and her travel correspondent on being road trip ready for a summer getaway.
Clever.
And again, the first step in a road trip is you want to make sure that not only you know where you're going, but the car is going to get you there. And so again, it's that preparedness. So it was a chance to talk about the business in context, but again, help somebody choose why they should go to us, because it was making it relatable where they saw themselves in the story. And so I've been fortunate that I've had the opportunity to, across my career, work with entities in that shared storytelling platform to be able to leverage their connection points to help foster a stronger narrative from the brand that I was representing.
Amazing. Well, I guess the first thing I'm a massive classic car guy, so I'm very used to changing the oil a lot of times. So love that. So now, just to kind of end with some quick fire questions, and so you don't need to kind of overly explain yourself. We can kind of keep it a quick fire. So first question is, I love this one. Show us your home phone screen. What are the apps that you couldn't live without?
My home phone screen, the apps that I could live without.
That you couldn't live without.
That I couldn't live without. I mean, this is a quick.
Love
I
it.
couldn't live without the message app. I definitely couldn't live without Waze because, like most men, I have no sense of direction. I couldn't live without my DoorDash app, and probably couldn't live without my Outlook app.
Love it. Nice. And if you could be the CMO at any company, which would you pick and why?
Be the CMO of any company, what would I pick and why? I would love to be the CMO of a high-end hospitality brand, whether that was Four Seasons, Mandarin Oriental, Ritz-Carlton, because I think that level of commitment to treating every guest as if they are the only guest is the epitome of something that is at the core of who I am as a leader, the subject of the book, the most recent subject of my tech TED Talk, which is the notion of thinking human, treating every customer or every guest as if they are the only one. What would you build around that, both pre, during, and post-purchase? And I think those brands do it phenomenally.
Love it. What was the last thing you asked ChatGPT or Claude?
What was the last? Let me
Let's have a
check.
look.
Let me check real quick. I am not going to share that with you. What I will say is my son is preparing to take one of the big standardized tests for college admission. He's a junior in high school. And so he took a practice test and we got the scores. And so I asked ChatGPT to analyze his test scores to give me an idea of where it ranks and, importantly, what we could reasonably expect in terms of growth, given that he took this cold and is now going to go through some education to learn how to take the test. That's a safe one. I'll tell you that one. I'll tell you that one.
How's your son looking?
He's looking really good. I mean,
Nice.
his pre-testing was in the top 12% for somebody who had never studied for it.
Amazing.
And they feel pretty good that his score can probably go up by 10 to 15%. So we've told him that, and now the hard work begins.
Amazing.
But it gave me a good sense of how to level set my expectations and my wife's expectations for what we could look forward to if he puts the effort in.
Love it. What's your favorite coffee shop in New York?
Look, I'm a Dunkin' guy. I mean, I know Starbucks is the right answer for many, but I think Dunkin' has their value equation spot on. It's the right cost for the right tasting product. So if I have to coffee, it's definitely going to be a Dunkin'.
Love it. And if you could have a superpower, what would you pick?
Wow. If I could have a superpower, it's a great question. I would probably say the ability to fly.
Okay. Yeah.
You
Nice.
know, we spend so much time in our days going from A to B, both virtually and otherwise. I wouldn't be able to get frequent flyer miles, which would kind of suck, but the idea of being able to, when you're ready, go. And I know that's essentially the equivalent of flying private, but in lieu of that, the ability just to say, all right, let's go, I think would be pretty amazing.
Love it. And what's your marketing hot take?
My marketing hot take: AI is not going to replace the modern day market.
Love it. Let's have a look. Okay. What's a question you wish I had asked you?
If you had to go back to your younger self at the start of your career, what is the one piece of advice that you would have given yourself?
What is the one piece of advice? Tell us.
So I would have given myself two pieces of advice.
Okay.
So first, I started out in a world before business casual. So suit, tie, suspenders was a good look, but don't get too comfortable in it, and don't buy too many pairs of suspenders because eventually they're going to get phased out. That would be the fashion part of it. I think the intellectual advice I would have given myself is stop stressing out about the right way or the wrong way to do anything. Realize that there is no right and wrong. There is just a way, especially in the world of marketing, and put your energy into developing a way of doing something. You'll get a lot more joy out of it. You'll take a lot more pride in it. And maybe you'll break some new ground and teach somebody something.
I mean, I feel like that's the perfect advice I need at this stage. And final two questions are, what's your World Cup final score prediction?
So I've tried my best as a sports fan to engage. I really, really have. I've been very lucky in that, like, probably the 2 hours of World Cup coverage that I have watched, there's been a goal scored at every time I've watched it.
Which game?
just any game I've turned on in the
good.
5 or 10 minutes, there's been a goal. I don't think at this point you can really look past Argentina. I just don't. I think you're looking at 3-2 and a shootout.
Interesting. Oh, okay. Okay, actually, 2 last questions. How come you responded to my cold outline?
To me, if I can help somebody unlock their potential, look, we all have a superhero inside all of us. You just have to have the courage to put on the cape and fly. And you reaching out takes courage. You reaching out with something that is being built to say, can you help me? If you as a leader ever find yourself not willing to help somebody, how could you expect somebody to help you? And so I don't know if you consider this help, but
No,
I just wanted to perhaps give you a little bit of a step forward in accelerating your career by sharing whatever wisdom, experiences I could have that maybe make what you're doing more interesting to somebody that they can believe further in you.
Well, I massively appreciate it. Thank you so much. And the last question is, which CMO should I interview next?
Which CMO should you interview next? It depends on what you want to get. I would say to you, if you could get Tracy Lieberman from Starbucks, talk to her. She's got a pretty formidable task at hand, which is to rejuvenate an iconic global brand, to help it regain its footing as a standard bearer in what is now, if not one of the most commoditized category that exists, which is coffee. She would be a riveting conversation. She's also a really good human being.
Well, Doug, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was lovely to chat to you. Have an awesome day.
Yeah, you too.